Hi, everyone. It is time. We're going to get started. I am delighted to welcome here today Max Zhang, who's the Irving Porter Church Professor of Engineering in the Sibley School of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering here at Cornell. Max works on a wide range of problems concerning energy and the environment, including air pollution, renewables, and deep decarbonization, as we'll hear about more today. And he's been very active at a range of scales, locally, across New York State, nationally, and internationally. And this work has garnered him a number of awards, including for Sustainable Tompkins Awards in 2016, awards for Engaged Scholarship here at Cornell in 2017, and the Cornell Town Gown Award in 2022. He's also a fellow of the Society of Mechanical Engineering. And so to give Max as much time to tell us about his tale of twin developments in energy, I'll turn it over. Thanks, Max.
All right, thanks. It's an honor to be here. It's especially honored to be here on the Earth Day, right? Thank you for the turnout. And
are you not advancing?
I'm gonna tell you. So basically, I want to share some stories about so-called energy transitions. I don't know if this has been covered much by this seminar, right? So everything I talk about, right? So is related to energy transitions, right? So what is energy transition? The energy transition is essentially how we use energy, right? So present a little bit context first, right? So I think the very beginning, right? So for a human to leave an environmental footprint, it started with invention of fire, right? So, and for hundreds of years, right? So, or not longer, and the human society had been relying on biomass, right? So, as the main form of energy for a long time, for 1,000 years, right? So until about the first industrial revolutions, right? So and then the human society started using coal massively, right? So I want to make it very clear, right? So humans started using coal a long time before this, right? You know yourself when people start first to use the coal, long time ago, right? But everything I talk about in terms of on a massive scale, right? So Jim Watt invented the steam engine, right? Actually, he didn't invent the very first steam engine. He just made a steam engine very practical, right? So, and with that invention, human society can use a coal massively, right? So that's the beginning of that's already a transition, right? From biomass to coal, right? And then, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, as we know. Actually, he's not exactly the first person who invented the first light bulb, right? So the major difference is the people before him, right? Their light bulb only lasts 5 seconds, right? So his light bulb lasts for 10 minutes. So that's make a huge difference, right? And then the significance of that invention is human society they're using a lot of electricity, right? So that's the using more and other form of energy to generate electricity. So Carl Benz he got invention of the first called a gas fuel car, right? So, but really, it's another American, Henry Ford, right? Figured out how to the so-called assembly line, right? So now you can mass produce cars, right, and vehicles, right? And so then that's the oil age, right? So as a matter of fact, for a little bit history, so people using oil well before, also before the invention of the vehicle, right? So anybody know, anybody heard, Rockefeller, right? Anybody, John Rockefeller? Anybody heard of John Rockefeller? Yes. We even have a Rockefeller Hall, right? So on campus. He also known as the first billionaires in the world, right? Right now there are probably plenty of them, right? So, but John Rockefeller was the first one, right? So anybody know how he makes his fortune from oil, right? Yes. And when he become a millionaire, what he sell? He sell a lot of oil, right? So he sold a lot of oil, right? For what purpose? For cars, for cars, for gasoline to power a vehicle. Is that the case? John Rockefeller make his first billion by selling gasoline. Is that true? Typically when a speaker asks that question, it's true. Likely the answer no, right? So otherwise, not gonna make any white pill. So then, for what purpose? What applications sell the oil for? Anybody heard of the part of history? Yes. Train. Actually, that's also later, right? For lighting, right? So basically that's the kerosene, right? So actually a little bit more history, right? So anybody know where is the first oil exploration? Where did that happen? The first oil explorations, oil extractions. Where did it happen, or when did it happen, roughly? It's in Pennsylvania. It's in 1865, right? So, and then the most the killer app, right, for the oil at the time was for lighting, right? So then Rockefeller took advantage of it. Right. So basically, we're talking about how we use energy in a massive scale, but on the other hand, right? So this is a info graphic from GE. So basically showing the energy demand, right? Use the lighting as an indicator. So basically, the idea here is between 2007 and 2023 and 2030, right? So the power requirement will double, right? So of course, this was produced about around 2007. So actually, we are on track, right, to double the worldwide, right? Worldwide, double the electricity consumption. Try to make sure Christy can see it. I don't know where's anyway. So this on the demand side, right? Demand side, there's growing energy demand. We can discuss more. What's the driver? What is the driver for growing energy demand? So multiple drivers, right? So the number one actually is the population growth, right? So worldwide, right? So and but at the same time, right? So there's also consequences, right, for the way we're using energy, right? So just give you a few examples, right? Actually, I'm curious. Anybody recognize the figure to the bottom right? What is that? Yes. Quarry? Huh? A quarry? A quarry. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, but anyway, it's quarry. Quarry for, I don't know, we can define a quarry. Anybody, definitely similar to quarry. For what? Coal, yes. I don't know what we can call it quarry, but that's it's for coal, right? So it's called a mountaintop removal, right? So it's literally we remove top of the mountain in order to extract coal from it, right? So that's the one of many consequences, right? So how the way we use energy on the environment, right? Okay, so this is enough background. Let's talk about our first example, right? So first is case studies, shale gas, and we'll talk about solar later, right? If you ever been to a park around here, you probably this is sound familiar to you, right? So because Ithaca, right? So it's a part of the shale gas, shale rock formation here, right? So you probably see this, many like layers, many layers of rocks, right? So talk about the energy transitions, right? So I want to give you some some little bit recent history, right? So there's some of you may be familiar with this organization called the U.S. Energy Information Agency, right? Also called EIA, right? So what they do is do the number crunching, record how we use energy right now, right? But also they do projection, right? So how we gonna use energy 20 years from now, right? So what I'm showing you right now is the I don't know if you can see my pointer here. So this report roughly they created in 2002, right? So basically before 2002, they already had a data for, right? Beyond 2002, all projection, right? Make sense? So this is a projection or the record, right? Or the for natural gas, right? So this is the 2002 understanding by the U.S. government on what's the trend for the natural gas, right? As you can tell, they think conventional, beyond 2012 to the next 20 year-ish, conventional gas is going to stay roughly the same, right? You're going to see some like more growth from their gas from the oil sand, right? And some growth in so-called coal bed methane. We can talk about that later if you have questions. What is this? But also there's some growth, very tiny growth in something called a gas from shale gas, right? So that's their projection. 2002. So this is their 2015 report, right? So as you can tell, if you look back, right? If you look back, the projection in 2002 is totally wrong, right? So this is by a very authoritative, organization in the energy sector, right? So they totally missed the growth of the shale gas. Okay, so I try to put those two graphs in the same scale so you can sort of compare them, right? So, and what happens, of course, don't have a lot of time to describe this, but technology-wise, there are two things happening, right? So happening at around the same time. One is called horizontal drilling, right? So, essentially you have, typically you're doing the oil or gas drilling, just typical vertical, right? But the industry, oil gas industry, figure out when you do vertical, right? Going pretty deep, and then start going horizontal, right? So that's called a horizontal drilling. Right? So as you can tell, right? So you have to, figure out how to make it work. The other technology called the hydraulic fracking, right? So what happens is to make the drilling fill with water, a lot of water, right? Highly pressurized water. So that when you do the horizontal drilling, right, you can also fracture the rock, right, to extract the gas, from this, right? So both the horizontal drilling, right, and the hydraulic fracking make the extractions of shale gas happens, right? So that's EIA total miss that's trend, right? So then what is consequence, right? So we're talking about energy transition, right? So I'm comparing the two pie chart, right? Each one represents where does the electricity come from, right? So in the United States, this is 2005. Bottom one is about 14 years later, 2019, right? In 2005, half of the electricity, right, in the United States was generated from coal, right? In 2019, they already dropped to 24%, right? I have similar graph later. So right now, the coal fraction is about 15, 16%, right? Say 2023. So what happened? This actually, you can tell, this is also an energy transition, right? So in the electricity sector, we used to rely on so much on coal, but right now, to a much lesser extent, right? From this transition, is it what? Why? It's because renewable. No, it's actually not much by the renewable, right? So actually in this graph, renewable all belong to well, except the hydro power, right? So renewable all belong to the other fraction, right? Other fraction, of course, it grows, right? Relatively by a lot, but absolutely not much, right? So majority of the growth in terms of the share of the electric generation is from natural gas, right? From about 19% 2005 to about 38% in 2019, right? So the decline in coal consumption for electric generations is driven by the rise in natural gas. Make sense? Right. Also, this is on the right here, showing a graph of the essentially natural gas price, right? So historically, from like late 1990s to by now, right? So I can tell we have a little bit spike in the 2008-ish, but after that, for a long time, right? So natural gas has remained at a pretty stable, historical low price range. Okay. So you can argue, as we rely on natural gas for electricity generation, also for a lot of families rely on using natural gas for heating, right? So you could perceive as a good thing, right? So make your heating costs more manageable, right? Also, definitely, you can argue it created a job opportunity, right? So here actually is when you extract, depend on the geological formation, right? So you also can get oil or gas or at the same time, right? So so this is particular for the shale oil, right? So in North Dakota, I can tell the employment definitely increases, right? So during at the places where it happens, right? And not only for the energy sector, right? So if you look at the petrochemical sector, right? So rely on natural gas as the feedstock, right? So you see this is the U.S. ethylene capacity, right? You can tell in like late 2010-ish, they actually have a decrease in the capacity of the refinery, right? But with actually the capacity increased by quite a bit, right? Because recently, because of low, more abundant feedstock to the petrochemical industry, right? So it not only helped the energy sector, right, but also helped the petrochemical sector, which rely on natural gas as the feedstock. This is my first movie reference. Anybody watch this one? Nobody? Yeah, the flop one. Oh, there's no one here. It's a 2019 movie by I think probably only on Netflix. It's actually won the 2020 Academy Award for Best Documentary, right? So the story was this is a Chinese automotive glass company, right? So they started the factory, right, in a town near Dayton, Ohio, right? So, and then the movie is about the cultural classes, clashes, between the Chinese side of the management side and the U.S. worker and management, right? So that's the theme of the movie, right? So I'm not gonna spoil the content here. But my point here is that in one part of the movie, right? So they are asking, why doesn't how can make a sense, to start a company, start a factory in the United States, considering the labor cost is so high here, right? So, on the right hand side, right? So there's a Chinese, the person in the middle, uh, he basically is on, he working the Chinese side of it, in China, but he came to the United States to train the U.S. worker, right? So, and his salaries is about 1/3, right? It's about 1/3 of the other two in the back, right? So, in terms of labor costs, right, it doesn't make anything, right? It doesn't make anything, right? So, to build a factory here, right? But the owner side, right? This is actually part of the movie. So the owner side is why, why did I do that? Because first, right? So now my factory is closer to my customer base, right? Because like GM, Ford, all those major automotive companies using their products, right? So now I reduce my shipping. So, and secondly, is the natural gas price, right? In the United States is only a fraction of the cost in China, right? So as you can tell, right? So the glass making process is very energy intensive, right? So you need a lot of produce a lot of heat, right? So the energy cost, as the input, right? So it gonna affects the overall cost by quite a bit, right? So because of low natural gas price here, right, and also the close vicinity, right, to the customer base, it actually make economic sense for that company to relocate some of their manufacturing capacity from China to the United States, right? So that is true for many other sectors, right? So which rely on high energy input, right? So this is just another benefit of the low natural gas price. Um, if you look at the distributions of the shale gas, shale formation, right? It also tend to spread around, right? It's not concentrated in one part of the United States, right? It's actually spread around a little bit, right? So now we are actually, you can tell we are in the Marcellus shale formation here around this region, right? So it's kind of part of it. But then there are many others, right? So across the United States, right? So in some ways, it's more even, more or less, right? Evenly distributed, right? So a lot of places they can benefit. Worldwide, similar story, right? Not just concentrated in one part of the world, like the conventional oil, right? More or less spread around, right? Anybody recognize this person? So it turned out the shale oil and gas development in the United States have significant geopolitical implications, right? The only time I find it very interesting. The only time that Putin sound like environmentalist, which is very rare, I guarantee you. The only time what Putin sound like environmental is when he talk about the shale gas, right? So he basically, or shale oil, same thing, right? So basically, uh, he said the essentially saying, shale gas and oil production is barbaric, right? Those technology are destroying the environment, right? Even though Russia is the #1 oil producing country in the world, right? So why? Because it feel the pressure, right? So, and United States, I remember, right? So in the early 2000s, right? So 60% of the oil consumption in this country, right, was imported, right? So, and right now it's still not 100, U.S. not 100% oil independent, mostly because of economic reason, right? So because sometimes cheaper to buy than produce here, but the U.S. had the capacity to become oil independent, right? So the consequence, for example, right? So if you remember, I know you don't, because for this audience, probably too young for that, right? In Obama administration, right? So Obama administration negotiated a nuclear deal with Iran, right? So at that time, right? So you gotta be old enough to remember that. So that deal wouldn't happen, right? Wouldn't happen if the U.S. is not on track to become oil independent, right? So essentially, there's a lot of more bargaining powers, right? So for the United States to negotiate with oil producing country at the time. Okay. Okay. So up to this point, you may think shale gas and shale oil is the best thing ever happened to energy transition, right? Make our energy price more affordable, provide plenty of feedstock to petrochemical industry, provide job opportunities, right? Rebalancing the geopolitical stage, right? And it's the best thing ever, right? Happened to energy transition, right? But the story is much more complicated than that, right? So so there's a lot of significant environmental impact, right, associated with the shale gas exploration, right? So this is a typical site will look like, right? Um, so I can tell there's a lot of heavy equipment, right? Also a lot of water tanks, and you certainly have a lot of, which means a lot of traffics, right? Constantly bringing water and also wastewater, back and forth, right? So a lot of heavy equipment to power those uh, machinery, right? And because the way the works have a lot of impact on water, I'll talk about later. Here just on the top right here, showing those are water tanks, right? So bottom right here showing the essentially the each one is a oil drilling pad, right? Right now, I think the number probably is even higher now, right? So probably about 50 million people uh, living within about 1 mile, right, from a fracking well. So you can also see here, right? Um, so this is the which year is this? No, there's not. This are not. I think it's 28, 17, 18-ish, right? Because at that time, New York State facing a decision, right? So whether to allow fracking, right, for shale gas exploration or not, right? Because the neighboring states, Pennsylvania, right? So their policy is to fully embrace, right, shale gas exploration, right? It's just cross the southern border of the United States, there's a lot of plenty of activity, right? So the New York State at the time facing a decision is whether to allow this activity in the United States, in New York or not. Those are the some of the photos you can see here, right? Anybody know what's the New York policy? Considering Pennsylvania is fully embrace oil gas, shale gas. What's the New York policy? 50%? Or something like that, or something. Anybody know? Can you find any shale gas drilling pad in New York? No, right, right. So I can tell, right? Um, typically when you ask a question, either 0 or 1, right? That's the most common answer. Um, so New York basically, the state of New York basing 0, it's essentially absolute ban of the oil exploration, right? Seal exploration here, right? So you can tell it's a much more complex question here, right? One state almost 100% embracing it, the other state 100% banning it, right? So I think that you have to consider everything, right? So in terms of employment, right? Economic activities, environment, and other impacts, right? So speaking of impact here, right? So definitely from the water, I think the slide will be shared with the group here. So basically, you don't need to use a lot of water, right? Also, a lot of water, how to send those lot of water, that water to often, below the water table, right? And also you not just inject water, right? So because of all those erosion, because of all the, bacterial activities, so the industry had adding little bit, additives, right? So to the water, so not pure water. So the so-called fracting fluid, right? So and those are the known compounds, right? So but the industry never disclose what they exactly adding to the water, right? Because they treat it like a business secret, right? So but a lot of those additives are toxic, right? And there's question in terms of the surface water, also the groundwater, right? Because for surface water, you need a lot of, somehow bring a lot of water from sources like, river, lakes, right? So bring to the site, right? And then from the groundwater, right, you have to inject them, right, to below, right? So there's common questions, right? So for the sake of time, I kind of skip here, but the slide will be shown, right? Will be sure. Um, that's the impact on air, right? On water, right? So there are also impact on air, right? Because when you're running those heavy equipment, right? So also fossil fuel powered, right? A lot of emission on sites because you have to bring a lot of water back and forth, right? And a lot of emissions associated with traffic, right? And the gas itself, when you extract, there's leakage, there's pollution associated too, right? Also, there's land use concern, right? So, in terms of, um, so, how going to change the landscape, right? How to, whether going to, disrupt the ecological system, right? So, and whether going to, introduce, earthquake, right? Or something like that, right? So there are a lot of questions regarding the land use, right? And actually, those are not even the most debatable question here, right? The most debatable question, to my understanding, is in terms of their impact on climate, right? So the text is a little bit tiny. You couldn't see very well, but I can tell a little bit the story about this, right? Um, so there's a group of colleagues at Cornell. This is paper 2011, right? So you probably recognize some of their name. So, in 2011, a group of researchers at Cornell published a paper. Right? Basically, their essential argument is shale gas in terms of the climate impact. Right? Shale gas is worse than coal. So that's their main point. Right? So this is the paper on the left, right? Um, so after that, the other group of researchers, also at Cornell, wrote a comment to the to the original paper, right? So I don't know how many of you are doing research, right? So when you publish a paper, right, if other people disagree with you, they can write a short comment saying, "This why we disagree with that paper, and this is why 1, 2, 3," right? So another group of researchers, from the great Department of Earth and Atmospheric Science, wrote essentially a rebuttal saying, we disagree with the argument that the climate impact of shale gas is worse than coal, right? So anyway, well, so apparently, in the academia world, right? So if you disagree with the comment to your paper, you can write another comment, right? A comment to the original paper, right? So that's what the first group did, right? They read another comment to the comment saying, we disagree with the disagreement of the group to our original paper. This is what 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So apparently you can do that, indefinitely, right? So the other group, right? So they're saying, we don't even have time to have a published comment, but this is why we disagree with the comment to the comment of to the original paper, right? So this is why 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So I think they publish online, right? So you can tell, right? So I don't know how you feel. When I see this, I feel I'm very proud to be here. Right? So at least we have academic freedom, right? To have a debate, right? So on the kind. So the question is why? Why people going back and forth on this, right? So I think the root of question, debatable question, the point of discussion here is the so related to something called the global warming potential. Right? How many people recognize this term, GWP? Do I need to explain this? Okay. A short version of GWP is that because there are many different kind of greenhouse gases, right? So sometimes you want to compare them, right? So, and then what GWP is saying, GWP is the radiative forcing of CO2 or the climate or warming potential, right? Of CO2 is 1, right? Let's say this 1 as a reference, right? And you can assign, calculate how stronger, right, or weaker, right, mostly stronger, the other gases in terms of warming, their potential for warming the climate, right? So for methane, right, which is 95% of at least more of the natural gas, they have much higher global warming potential, which means, say 20 year, 85. What 84 means, right? So essentially saying, in terms of their climate, the warming potential, right, or climate impact, 1 ton of methane in the air is equivalent of 84 tons of CO2. Right? But also make the matter even a little more complicated. There's a time associated with it, right? Because the lifetime of CO2 is longer, about 100 years or more, and methane is shorter, right? So about 20 or 24 years, right? So that's why if you average those impact over longer time, which is the 100-year horizon, right? The GWP number is lower, but still much larger than 1, right? So even in, you look at for 100-year horizon, 1 ton methane still about 30 tons of CO2 in terms of their warming potential, right? Scientific called it radiative forcing, right? So what I mean here is, in any of those steps, right? In the gas, extraction and to the end use, right? if any of the molecule, right, of methane leak from the systems, they will cause a much stronger impact than they will be burned in, because then they will essentially when this methane was combusted, they turn into CO2. Right? So the leakage of the methane is very important question, right? So the question, how much, right? If nothing leaks, right, methane good. If a lot of leaks, right, consider their larger GWP, it's bad, right? Um, so I believe this is the environmental defense fund. Some researcher estimated if the overall leakage rate, right, is about 3%, right? Methane is more beneficial than coal, right? Essentially. Then the question, what is in the reality, right? So, for example, EP estimates this probably need to be updated is less than 2%, which means if you believe that number, right? So methane is still better than coal. But a lot of researchers using variety of methods, right? Using some satellite remote sensing and, put the instrument on the airplane, to try to estimate the leakage. This can be somewhere from 2 to 7%, right? So, which means if a 7%, methane is worse than coal in terms of climate, okay? But because of the uncertainty of this range, right? So it's hard to make a very science-driven decision here because there's uncertainty, right? So also in reality is that I would say 20% of uh, the drilling pads cause 80% of the problem, right? So because they don't sometimes, there are company, follow very good environmental practice, right? So make sure all those operations are like a leakage free, right? But also there are companies who don't pay a lot of attention to that, right? So cause a lot of leakages. So that's another challenge to that problem. Anyway, movie time. So anybody watch that movie? Which one? Promised Land? Nobody? Fabio? No. All right. So the the story is okay. So Matt Damon, right? So Matt Damon in this movie, he play a shale gas developer, right? So he went to a Pennsylvania town, try to convince the town to allow his company to extract shale gas from the town, right? So, and then he almost got there until this older senior gentleman saying we need more scientific evidence, right? So this is in the later part of the movie uh, when they have a discussion, right? Okay, we need so the story goes, right? So I don't know. Should I tell you what's going on there? Anyway, let's keep going, right? So, like I said, Matt Damon, right, play oil seal developer. Um, and he tried to convince town to prove it. And then apparently this gentleman gives him a hard time, right? And at the same time, he fell in love with a high school teacher in town, right? So, you know, when all those movies, right? All those energy sector related movies, you always had to add a little bit parallel romantic storyline to make it more marketable, right? So this movie is not exception. Okay, I think this is where. Okay, a little bit of a harder time, right? You can check this, right? So essentially what he said is, there's nothing in this town, a rural town in Pennsylvania, right? There's nothing for the town to sell, right? Right? Uh, you are offering us a lot of money, right? The only thing we need to do is to allow you guys to burn the earth, right? So that is essentially what he said, right? So anyway, um, but that sort of reflect to many, I think it's realistic, right? Realistic, description of what happening in a lot of those rural towns, right? So uh, anyway, but so I think I answered this. I don't know how my time going, right? So this is for one example, right? For shale gas, right? Then talk about renewable, right? So talk about solar, right? So for solar, we have very ambitious goal, right? So New York has goal, very ambitious goal, and the federal government has, United States as a whole has a very ambitious goal, right? And also, if you ask a question, right, like what kind of power plant we are building right now, right? If I ask this question, we're building right now, right? So this is back to that Energy Information Agency, right? So majority or vast majority of the power plant being right now are solar power plant. Okay, I can tell you is this is their estimation of the new capacity adding to the system, right? So in 2024, and out of those 60 gigawatt, right, solar account for 36 gigawatt, right? So basically right now, all of natural gas only people don't build a lot, right? So a lot anymore. New York had a law called the CLCPA. You probably heard of it, right? So essentially, the goal here is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, right? So, and it has certain goal, right? For example, by 2030, right? So we're 6 years from now, 7% of the electricity we generate from renewable, right? And by 2040, 100% from clean electricity, which means renewable plus nuclear, right? So there are certain other goals, right? So, but the question is, how can you get there, right? And once again, this is the basic graph here. I just want to pay attention to the biggest share of this graph, right? So this one showing is in order to achieve our goal by 2050, right? Near end of that, what our energy mix will be like, right? 2022 more or less present, right? So you can tell still dominated by oil and gas, right? Fast forward to 2050, majority of generation based on this, planning assets will be generated from solar. Majority of electricity will be generated from solar, right? So on this figure, right? So to the right here, it's showing the absolute value, right? So on the left, showing the relative fractions, right? On the right, showing the absolute value, right? So once again, the story here is majority of electricity generation in the state of New York will come from solar, right? How much, right? Rather about the 60 gigawatt, right? So, and what's the current level, right? I think currently we about have six gigawatt, right? So, which means how to grow by a lot, very quick. So that's the point, right? You would say everybody loves solar, right? People can debate, then natural gas is good thing or not, but everybody loves solar, right? If you're a solar power plant, no problem. Everybody will be happy for you guys to build solar. Is that the case? This is back to my point, right? So now it's complicated, right? So even you are building a solar power plant or solar farm, right? There's still a lot of community resistance, right? So for building solar, right? Just few examples, right? So question, why, right? We're building renewable power. Why people have a problem with that? This is back to the land use, right? So I think one of the root problem land use, right? So this is where what kind of land use size, right? So for different type of activity, for example, agriculture, right? Actually occupy a lot of lands, right? Actually, I was surprised by this number, right? And but if you are seeing, I don't know, I see here, basically, the little solar panel in the middle there, right, to the right. So if you're saying I'm gonna, regardless where I'm gonna do that, but I say I'm gonna cover a certain fraction of the land in order to meet all electricity use, right, or achieve my goal by 2050. How much land I need, right? So in order to provide that power, right? It's estimated to be about 0.5% of the US surface area in order to generate power, right? Some argue that's tiny, right? So that's not even, compare agriculture, that's a small number, right? So that's one view in terms of how much land you need, right? But on the other side is that if you look at like per megawatt basis, right? So in this graph, we basically, in order to, basically compare different form of energy, right? So you sort of, essentially can tell typical renewable, right? You generate for a given amount of power, right? You need to occupy more surface, more land, right? So it's the same, it's true for hydro, wind, and solar, right? Compared to their fossil fuel counterpart, right? So the land use footprint for solar about 5 to 7 acres per megawatt. Okay. So what does that mean? Anybody know what's the size of like a Cornell Central Campus? What's the land area for Cornell Central Campus? By Central Campus, I mean now including all the surrounding ag land, right? Just from the Nguyen Quad to the Vet School, Anybody know what's the size? How many acres?
Is it 300?
300. Larger than that. 700. 750, roughly. 750 acres, right? Which means if you tear down all the building on campus and just turn Cornell Central Campus into a solar farm, right? Based on 5 to 7 acres per megawatt, you can build up roughly 120 megawatt, right? Right. But a New York goal, not even the national goal, right? New York goal is 60 gigawatt, right? 60 gigawatt, turning Cornell campus, we may perceive to be very large, right? Doesn't even register, right? Only a tiny fraction of the total goal, right? So still need a lot of land, right? So to build a solar farm. And currently, so this reference from the paper from my group here is the basically asked question is on on the left here is what's the current land use for solar, right? If you add hay and pasture and the cultivated crop, basically over 40% of solar farm, right, are on ag land, right? And the figure to the right here showing based on the different criteria, what's the future growth of solar going to be? What again in your state, and also likely to be on ag land as well, right? In terms of the soil quality. So, but more than 80% future solar farm likely also be on ag land, right? So me ask the question why? Why you had to build a solar farm on ag land, right? Can you build somewhere else? Actually, there's a sort of simple economic reason, right? Because if you build a solar farm, you want to relatively flat land, right? Easier to build, right? And clear of vegetation, right? Otherwise, you had to, you know, to tear down trees, right? So, and also closer to roads, so either to transport, right? Ideally close to the power infrastructure, right? So that's simple criteria when you select sites for solar farm, right? If you look at all the criteria, the good agricultural land actually fit the bill. So actually they fit the same, very similar characteristics, right? So driven by economics, that's why you often see solar farm built on ag land, and we're probably gonna see more, right? And also community acceptance to the solar farm. This is from a survey also by some Cornell researcher, right? So basically they're saying, the community support for renewable for solar, right, decrease when the size of the development become larger, right? So it's a rooftop solar, lots of support, right? When you get into the large scale solar, utility scale solar, the support decreases, right? So that's another challenge. So those are what I listed, all the concerns with the solar farm, right? So interestingly, right? So a lot of those concerns are very similar to the shale gas development, right? Taking out the farmland, shale gas take out the farmland, solar take out, right? Disrupting ecosystems, similar concern. Shale gas disrupting the ecosystem, solar disrupting the system, right? The waste management issue, right? So there are a lot of, even though we can use one is the fossil fuel, the other renewable, but in terms of the actual implementation, a lot of concerns actually similar, right? So this is the challenging part of energy development, right? So what we can do about it, right? So this at least my argument, a lot of to do what my research group is doing, is the solar farm gonna look basically we are saying the future solar farm gonna be different, right? Be different. This is what we call conventional solar farm, right? So you say design solar farm with one goal, right? To generate electricity as much as you can for a given area of land, right? So what you do is to pack those panels as close as you can, right? I mean, you cannot pack them, locate them right next to each other because of the shading, right? So other than that, try to be as close as possible. So the argument we're trying to make is, in the future, likely you had from this called the mono-use, right? Mono-use means used for one thing, electricity generation, to multi-use. Multi-use means used for electricity generation plus something else, right? So in order to make a more solar development more community friendly and environmental friendly. So some idea here is animal grazing. You'll probably see sheep at solar farm, or at least see photo of it, right? So it turned out to be a win-win situation. Some Cornell research actually contribute to that development, right? Because for solar farm, you have to pay to mow your lawn anyway, right? So because you don't want the grass grow too tall to cause shading of the panel, so and reduce your energy consumption, generation, right? So, and then you have typically your traditional way is to pay some mower, right? So using fossil fuel to mow the lawn, and or you pay some grazing farmer, right, to raise their sheep at solar farm. So it turned out to be at a parity in terms of cost, right? So similar, right? So actually you can tell there's more right now, right? If you build a solar farm and you want to do the sheep grazing, right? The limiting factor is you couldn't find enough sheep farmers to do that, which is some way a good thing, right? So, but also a one challenge here is the market, right? So suppose we can do sheep grazing as every solar farm, right? So what you do with all the sheep, right? Uh, with all the lamb, right? Or wool, right? I think I need to go quick, but I think more than 5 minutes. Um, so another sort of it's a research question is how you can you graze cattle instead of sheep, right? Which is much more challenging because cattle, sheep are typically more tamed, right? And cattle tend to be more temperamental, I guess. So there's a lot of challenges with cattle, but people are doing research on that. Another one is you produce so-called pollinator habitats, right? So essentially, you grow wildflower, hopefully attract bees, right? So and then hopefully there are some pollinating species nearby can benefit from habitat. Uh, the most challenging problem in this part of the country is growing crops, right? So, but actually, people see this as a scalable solution, but also more challenging, right? Because both crops and solar panel are competing for the same thing, right? For sunlight, right? So the crop needs sunlight to grow, solar panel needs sunlight to generate electricity, right? So essentially had to be a compromise. Um, there's another idea, right? So can you design your solar farm rather a industrial facility then you create something like community space, right? Um, so there's a different questions, right? So regarding whether this is a good idea or not, I can skip that. So my research group, basically we are working on this kind of, we are basically developing tool, right, for designing solar farm, right? So have different part of, in terms of the structural, um, how design solar farm with more ecological friendly, but also can withstand the wind load and snow load, right? And also have radiation module because that's a typical limiting factor, right? So how can, what kind of crop can grow and where the sites based on radiation, adding more physics, now, but also consider soil and the vegetation and water, right? Um, and adding even more physics and the biological factors, and adding the animals and insects, but also how to make economic works, right? So that's we have a large team of students are working on different side of part of the area. You are welcome to join us if you're interested. Contact me, right? So recently, two of my PhD students, receive $20,000 from Department of Energy in a national pitching competition, right? So actually, they are the only team from New York to win, to be in the final stage, right? So it's gaining some traction, right? Um, so what is my goal? Anybody watching this one? Virtual? Watch one? What is my goal? Anybody watching this one? You did. Oh, actually, there are more than the promised land. Good. Uh, so, okay. Our design goal here, at least my design goal here, if you can bring your girlfriend or boyfriend to a solar farm for a romantic gathering, we we Chirago. So is it true? Is it ever possible? Yeah. Actually, this audio work well here. The lighting is a little bit. That's all right. But you ever think about having a date? Walking around the solar farm. That's our design goal, right? So if I can get to a point, we made it, right? So that's right. So actually, this is one of the concentrated solar farm already existed. Anyway, oh, okay. I think I'm getting there. If I can have I'm going to kind of skip that. If I can, I'll do one more clip. Okay. So you say, well, you say, why is so difficult to develop the renewable projects, but it has always been difficult, right, to develop the renewable energy projects, right? So this show another example when, okay, so the story is that uh, in the 1960s, right? So as part of the New Deal, right? So the one idea is to electrify the rural area by developing hydropower plant, right? So one of the most ambitious projects called the TVA, right? Tennessee Valley Authority. So uh, because of that, right? So basically you had to build a dam, right? So you had to relocate people, right? So what I'm showing here is a federal agent, right? Talking to the last remaining resident on an island, right? To convince him or convince her to to relocate, right? So that's the conversation. Uh, anyway, you see the point, right? So the argument of this lady is saying, I like the river as it is, as what nature makes it, right? So it's the same argument for solar. I want the landscape as it is, right? As the nature makes, right? So this is 1960. This is this movie 19, but what happened, what describing in 1930, right? So has always been here. So, all right. In closing, so there's a little backstory about the promised land, right? So as I mentioned before, the storyline is Mac Damon, as an oil shale gas developer, went to a Pennsylvania town, to convince town to develop solar, and then fall in love with a high school teacher, and he changed mind, right? But the script was written, the original script of this movie was written differently. Anybody know what's the storyline of the original script? So the original script was Matt Damon play a wind energy developer and went to a Pennsylvania town, try to convince the town to allow his company to build the wind turbines. And then he fell in love with a high school teacher and changed his mind. So because during the early phase of wind energy development, there's a lot of resistance. And someone wrote a movie script for it, right? So just later on, they changed back to, change to natural gas, right? And so anybody know, this is my last slide, my last slide. So anybody know NIMBY, right? I presume you all know NIMBY. Anybody know NIMBY? What is the name NIMBY?
Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard. Very good. Anybody know banana? Anybody know banana in this context? Okay, this is where you can pass your friend, right? So anybody know NIMBY, but a few people know banana. Oh, the banana means build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything, right? So that's definitely one of the sentiments for some people, right? So absolutely, if you build something, it have zero impact, but it's important. Hey, thank you.
I think we are actually out of time for questions today. Yes.
No questions.
Yes. And enjoy your Earth Day. You can chat with Max on your way out.